President of Association of Hair Restorative Surgery in 2013. He's also been a President Association of Cutaneous Surgeons of India from 2010 to 2013. So he has held several offices as a president of those offices. He is an ITMP mentor, field medal awardee, ASDS. He has been on the editorial board of several prestigious journals, both national as well as international. He has been an editor-in-chief of the hair transplantation, editor-in-chief in ACSI textbook of dermatosurgery, chief editor of Journal of Cutaneous Aesthetic Surgery from 2007 to 2010, associate editor for Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology, board of SkinMed, IJD, IDOS, International Journal of Dermatology. He has been a voracious writer and he has got 7 books to his credit, 14 chapters, 84 very quality papers in international and national journals. And he has been a recipient of several orations and awards. And today he's going to talk on a very interesting topic of dermatopathology made beautiful. And I'm a staunch believer of the fact that if you know dermatopathology well, you also know clinical dermatology well. So dermatopathology helps you to understand the clinical dermatology also. So Dr. Venkat would enlighten us today with his informative talk on dermatopathology made beautiful. So welcome again, sir, and the screen is all yours now.
Thank you. This is a very useful series of lectures arranged by the Rajasthan team led by Dr. Dinesh Mathur. And one feels happy that such an effort is being made to involve speakers from all over India. And particular talk is roughly what I wanted to give last time when Dr. Dinesh Mathur asked. But at that time, just before 1 or 2 weeks, they had dermatopathology. So I had chosen a different topic, which was on pathophysiological principles underlying aesthetic treatments. So now this one, I have titled it as Dermatopathology Made Simple, Made Beautiful, and Made Interesting. The purpose of this lecture is to show that while one can be good in aesthetics, one can opt for surgery for purely practical reasons or because of passion. Continuing to learn dermatopathology, getting interested in it, taking an interest will help you in many ways. These two are not mutually exclusive. Dermatopathology and aesthetic dermatology are not exclusive. They actually go hand in hand. And that's what I have tried to do in my career and in my practice. And of course, in the books that I have written, as you can see here. So academics and practice, they are not exclusive. They go hand in hand and one needs to continuously learn and adapt to change as it happens in life. And the big changes happen to us now during this COVID time. And this is our latest book that we wrote during COVID because teledermatology, online dermatology is a big thing now. So if I have conveyed this particular message at the end of this lecture, I would consider my lecture successful. Now, why did I choose dermatopathology early on in my career in 1995? And why is it that so many dermatologists have become very good dermatopathologists? In fact, most dermatopathology books are written by dermatologists, not by pathologists. Partly because clinical dermatology is indeed gross dermatopathology. You look at a lesion, you look at a gross lesion pathology. That gross morphology is what we see as clinicians. It is tiny, but that is the gross dermatology. Second, of course, is both are visually oriented specialties. You look, you see, you observe, and you learn. Both in clinical medicine, clinical dermatology, and in dermatopathology. So no wonder so many dermatologists have become dermatopathologists. There is a third reason. Inflammatory dermatosis undergo change with time like this. They undergo change very quickly. And so a clinical picture gives the dimensions of length, width, and time. Histology, biopsy, gives dimensions of length, breadth, and depth. So when you combine these two, you get all the 4 dimensions. That is another reason why dermatologists can become good dermatopathologists. What is this? A question mark, and a biopsy is a question mark so many times. You ask a question in a biopsy. What is this? What's going on inside? But this is not how you should send a biopsy. This is not how you should do a biopsy. With a forceps being used on one side, it has become indented. So my suggestion to all the postgraduate students who are watching this, do not do a biopsy like this, or like this, or like this. These are very difficult to interpret, or like this. Don't use radio frequency to do a biopsy. See how charred the tissue has become here. Here, it has almost resulted in secondary acantholysis here. And you have got epidermis this side as well as this side. Do not send biopsies like this. So when you get a glass slide, this is your glass slide. First look at it. Many diagnoses can be arrived by just here. Now look at this. This is obviously a verrucous lesion. Looking at the way projections are there, the lesion is projecting outwards. There is a horizontal border, and the shape of the lesion suggests a flower-shaped lesion, and that is a viral wart. So sometimes looking at a slide can give you a diagnosis. As you can see here, gross hyperkeratosis, parakeratosis, vertical columns of parakeratosis. There is acanthosis and elongated rete, very thin strands of rete. And then there is an incurving. Look at the shape of the lesion, like a flower. So there is incurving here, suggesting a common wart. And if you look a little more closely, you will see this hypergranulosis throughout, confirming the diagnosis of viral warts, plus all these inclusion bodies here, bluish inclusion bodies, some amount of vacillation. This vacillation is more prominent in a plain wart, but it can happen in all warts. Another example, a glass slide. And what are you seeing here? Unlike the flower-shaped lesion there, you are seeing a horizontal border of an exophytic lesion. What is this? This is seborrheic keratosis. A horizontal border here, an exophytic lesion. And of course, you can see here some hortensis, which confirms this keratotic type of seborrheic keratosis. So a glass slide can be useful for diagnosis in many cases. Now, look at this. This was a painful nodule on the face. This is the glass slide. What do you see? The epidermis is here on the lower side. You see a bluish mass progressing upwards in a slightly undulating manner. This is the glass slide. This is the scanner view. See the glass slide going upwards from lower dermis, almost subcutis. It is going like this. Here also, the tumor is strikingly monomorphic, single type of cells. You can see here bluish cells. Some are pale looking cells. There are some, of course, spaces in between. This is a typical ecrine spiroadenoma. It is called spiroadenoma because it is spiral. It climbs up like a spiral. And that is best seen in a glass slide. There is nothing else in dermatopathology which looks like this. So ecrine spiroadenoma, difficult to diagnose in high power, but easier to diagnose on a glass slide. And of course, sometimes there are vascular channels, as you can see here, filled with vessels. That is one of the reasons why it is so painful. So this is what I'm trying to show here, that by looking at a glass slides, you can diagnose complex tumors. So this is what I meant when I said that dermatology is gross morphology and that morphology is variable. We have all types of lichen planus clinically, different types of psoriasis. We are very fond of giving names to each minute variation, but the underlying biology is consistent. So we have to explain these morphological variables on the basis of underlying consistent biological principles. That's what we have to do. And that's our job as both clinicians and dermatopathologists. This, of course, is psoriasis. Now just keep looking at the next few slides. Typical picture, elongated rete, regular even elongation. You can write a line here. And of course, some of them are club shaped. Even a first year postgraduate will say this is psoriasis. You have a bit of parakeratosis. You can discern small Monroe's microabscess here. Again, focal parakeratosis, these bluish masses amidst this eosinophilic stratum corneum, regular elongated rete, camel feet shaped rete. Again, the same thing. Now here you can also see the beginning of a Kogo's micropustules, spongiform pustules within the stratum malpighi with a few inflammatory cells. There are a few dilated blood vessels. And from these blood vessels, many polymorphs are climbing up and they're going right up to here in the parakeratoid stratum corneum, forming a Monroe's microabscess. This, of course, is the phenomenon of squirting papilla. And of course, when they are large, they form Kogo's pustule in the stratum malpighi. As you can see here, collection of polymorphonuclear cells. And if they become unilocular, as happens in pustular psoriasis, they become macropustules of Kogo's with plenty of polymorphs. These polymorphs have salt and pepper appearance because they were very tiny nuclei which has multilobulated. So this is psoriasis. Now you compare this slide. Almost looks like this, isn't it? You also have psoriasiform hyperplasia, which is fairly regular and elongated. You can draw a line here also. You can also see some parakeratosis here. Very easy to mistake for psoriasis. But there is something else you see. You see here some whitish looking cells, vacuolation type of cells. So what is this? They are looking different. They don't look like keratinocytes. Now you see here, these all atypical cells and they're filled entirely in the epidermis. There is nothing happening in the dermis except a few dilated blood vessels and few lymphocytes, but the epidermis is full of these atypical lymphocytes, atypical keratinocytes. And then they are showing some mitotic figures also. This is Bowen's disease. And the low power is easy to mistake it for psoriasis, but this is Bowen's disease. This is what makes dermatopathology so nice. And some, of course, I call it beautiful also. So you have to look for what is hidden. You see the deer here, which is very obvious, but you can also see many deers. This is one I am showing. But if you look around, there are many other deers also. That is what is dermatopathology. Now, this you can see here. This is again a fairly simple diagnosis. Epidermis showing a normal epidermis this side, then acanthotic epidermis, and then you can't make out the basal layer. There is an infiltrate which is hugging this epidermis, and this infiltrate is band-like throughout the lesion, and then that infiltrate is extending around the hair follicle also. This is classical lichen planus. A first-year student should diagnose this. And if you look at it closely, you can see here there is basal cell degeneration, but it seems to have been obliterated. There is no basal layer that you can make out. There is hypergranulosis, but that is focal. See here there is hypergranulosis, but here granular layer is normal. There is again hypergranulosis. So this is the so-called triangular or wedge-shaped or pyramid-shaped, what do you want to call it? Wedge-shaped hypergranulosis. And of course you can see a colloid body here. Classical lichen planus. This of course is colloid body, which is more typically seen. Then, of course, you have plain pigment incontinence dropping off into the dermis. And this, of course, is lichen planus. Fairly typical and nice. But there can be variations of this. Similar picture. What is the difference? The difference is in the epidermis. Vastly hypertrophic. So this is hypertrophic lichen planus. Look at this wedge-shaped hypergranulosis that you can see here. And then, of course, the flask-shaped plugs. These are not conical. These are flask-shaped. And that is typical of lichen planus. Something in high power. Look at the stratum corneum. Parakeratosis is not there. That is very important. Then, of course, you can basal cell degeneration here and a colloid body. And of that basal cell degeneration becomes more prominent as is happening here. You can get clear spaces. That is Max Joseph space. And if that becomes even more prominent, you get, of course, the bullous lichen planus. What is this? Now, it is, of course, similar to what we saw earlier, but all the change is limited to one dermal papilla between two reticulates. And this again is something very simple. This is lichen nitidus. This importance is in the size of the lesion. Lichen nitidus is a tiny papule. So you see limited pathology. So you always have to look for such clues which are hidden somewhere. Now look at this. This is a normal basal layer and we will see some changes in this basal layer now. This everybody knows, discoid lupus erythematosus. And what is happening here? One of the striking things that you see is every part of skin is affected, from epidermis right up to dermis. You can see a conical plug here. You can see some basal cell degeneration here. Patchy lymphocytic infiltrate both around the appendages and distributed in the dermis. Some amount of pigment incontinence. Dermis is pale here, that is dermal edema. This is the follicular plugs that we mentioned. And see here, what is happening to the dermo-epidermal junction? That is becoming thick. And see here, the basal cell vacuolation. And this is different from the one which we saw earlier. Their entire basal layer was wiped out. Here it is not wiped out. It is still standing. Those columnar cells are there. They just appear vacuolated. This kind of basal vacuolation is very typical of discoid lupus. And see here the edema, the pale dermis. Of course, the dermal infiltrate, which is lymphocytic, very prominently lymphocytic. And that vacuolation extends around the hair follicle. Extends around the hair follicle. Very typical of discoid lupus. So this is classic discoid lupus. But there is a difference. What is the difference? Of course, you see the basal cell vacuolation here, which is a little less extensive. You also see the infiltrate, edematous. Nothing here. You just see a pale dermis. And there are blood vessels. Same thing here. Pale zone here. Look at this vacuolation. With intact cells, they haven't disappeared. And this is just focal. It is not there everywhere. It is here, but this is normal. It's here, not here. Once again, look at these spaces. These spaces are appearing just below the basal layer. This, see here, these spaces are below the basal layer. Once again, this is classical lichen sclerosus atatrophicus. So now there are three diseases that I have shown you with basal cell degeneration, all looking a little different. Normal basal layer, typical lichen planus, wherein you can't make out the basal cell at all. Lupus erythematosus with a prominent infiltrate and then focal basal cell degeneration. Lichen sclerosus atatrophicus, wherein there is a pale edematous dermis. And then these spaces appear just below the basal layer. Look at how one change in one particular type of cell can have so many different patterns. Fascinating. Now, when you look at this biopsy, what is striking here is that it is like a column. This is what we call a rectangular biopsy or a square biopsy. From top to bottom, it is like this. Normally, biopsy tapers down at the end. Then, of course, you have some lymphocytic infiltrate, very thick collagen. And then you can see some here, some dilated blood vessels and lymphatics. And there is no subcutaneous fat that is replaced by the fibrous tissue. This, of course, is fibrosing dermatitis scleroderma. And see, this is what we call the rectangular biopsy. Now, this scleroderma is sometimes confused with morphea, but if you really see this picture, this side is LSCA, this side is morphea. There is hardly any comparison. It can easily be distinguished. I sometimes wonder why these are confused. This, of course, is pemphigus. Everybody can easily diagnose this. This is the classical appearance intraepidermal bulla with suprabasal acantholysis, rounded acantholytic cells, which you can see here with pycnotic nucleus. These are lined up side by side like this. Very nice appearance, like a row of tombstones, and some projections into it, what is called a villus, and you can see here, this is basically suprabasal, but a little bit into the higher level stratum Malpighi also. The same thing which I showed just now. Very nice pemphigus vulgaris. Now, what is happening here? You can see in this diagram, the acantholysis is getting into stratum Malpighi also, and that's what we will see now. This is Hailey-Hailey disease. So it's not just suprabasal. This is throughout the stratum Malpighi, leading to what is called typically as a dilapidated brick wall appearance, because all the cells get separated. And this is the typical appearance. This, of course, is bullous pemphigoid, and see the subepidermal bulla. Entire epidermis is intact. And you can see the beginning of the changes here with a bit of vacuolation. And of course, there is a fiber network here with plenty of mononuclear cells. And look at what is happening here. This sweat coil is going up, and there is a plane of cleavage surrounding it. Very nice. This is why I called this presentation as beautiful. See this. This is projecting into the blister cavity, and it is still intact, even through the cutting process of the biopsy. Now, this, of course, is what happens in a slightly late lesion. And you can see here that the epidermis probably is trying to grow in here. And after some time, it can almost look like an intraepidermal bulla. Not just some reddish looking structures here. What is that? And this infiltrate is predominantly around the blood vessels, filling up the blood vessels, altering the architecture of the blood vessels. And this, of course, is fibrinide. You can see here, this is classical leukocytic vasculitis. And then you can see how the infiltrate is progressing along the blood vessel. The blood vessels are going horizontally, vertically, and turning this way. So wherever the blood vessel is going, you are seeing the infiltrate in that. So this is typical vasculitis. And then, of course, you are seeing this polymorphonuclear cell, as I referred to earlier. This is nodular vasculitis. And what is happening here? It's a large vessel. It's an arteriole in the lower dermis, just above the subcutis. And you can see here how the vessel wall has got infiltrated, has got altered, and is filled with almost like a thrombus. And you can see how it is located deep into the dermis. And this is that orange colored fibrinoid that you can see here. And of course, these are all blood vessels which have got completely occluded. There is some amount of paniculitis also. So this is sometimes associated with a granuloma, epithelioid granuloma. That is what happens in erythema induratum. So this is nodular vasculitis. Now I want you to compare this. This is, of course, the slide which I showed you. What's happening here? It looks the same, isn't it? So this also looks like vasculitis. But there is something else. This is filled with cells, fairly large cells. Of course, it is in the blood vessel, Of course, there is an infiltrate around the blood vessel, but it is filled with not fibrin, but something else. And what are those something else? Look at these cells. They are dyskeratotic. They're atypical. See here. Dyskeratotic cells, atypical cells with mitotic figures. See here. This is the dyskeratotic cell. So strikingly present within a blood vessel. This is metastatic adenocarcinoma in the skin. This was a nodule of the breast. It was not diagnosed as breast carcinoma. And I picked it up and look at this. What a nice looking slide. Not really nice for the patient, but when you look under the microscope, you get very impressed with this. So this is how this particular case was diagnosed. Very, very impressive. Now this is skin colored papules on the extensor surface, particularly elbow and knees. And when you look at it, you actually see vasculitis, similar to what I showed just earlier. But if you look at it a little more closely, see these cells. They seem pale. They seem to be filled with lipid vacuole, like a foamy cell. See this? Lipid-laden cells. So what is this? This is after I saw this after a long time. I saw it sometime during last year, which in fact we reported extracellular cholestrosis in a case of erythema elevatum diutinum. Lipid leaks out from the blood vessel that is picked up from the macrophages and they become laden with lipid like this. Very nice and impressive slide. Now what's happening here? I showed you a question mark earlier. I'm showing another question mark here. See this, how it is progressing. It's going from here. This probably is a nerve fiber. These are appendages and it is going up like this. You are seeing pinkish masses everywhere. And there's the Langerhans type of giant cells. And similar thing are found in the epidermis, almost hugging the epidermis, almost hugging the epidermis. And there is something going up like this. See this. This one can almost mistake it for a band-like infiltrate, except that you have pinkish mass with bluish nuclei. And this is under black and white. This is something I like to show. See, these kind of things in dermatopathology, one should pick up by recognizing their shape and size and location. Like we do in clinical dermatology. When we look at lichen planus, we pick it up like this. We are not going to analyze each lesion. Is it flat topped? Is it polygonal? It's violaceous. We don't do that. We just look at it and diagnose. And that's what I'm trying to show here. A black and white picture, a typical tuberculoid granuloma. This is tuberculoid leprosy. And of course, this is the granuloma and high power. And you can see here, there is nothing that you make out here. The diagnosis is really here. So learn to recognize the shape, the size, the location. And what is this? See how these granuloma are curvilinear, like a comma shape. Wherever the appendage goes, wherever the sweat coil goes, and look at how this arrectospilorum is going up here, and you are seeing a granuloma in relation to that. Very nice slide. And that is under black and white. When you look at it, it should strike here. This is tuberculoid leprosy. And see how this arrectospilorum, this is a nerve fiber, is going up, and then there is a granuloma. Very nice slide. And this, of course, are the sweat coils, and the granuloma is surrounding that also. This is, of course, tuberculoid granuloma, tuberculoid leprosy. What is this now here? Here also you're seeing something like that, but these granuloma are not curvilinear. They are distributed all over the dermis. And what is happening to the epidermis? This is hypertrophic. And see the acanthosis, elongated rete. See here, this is lupus vulgaris. You are seeing the same kind of granuloma with a lot of epidermal hypertrophy, but these granulomas are not oval or elongated. They are somewhat round. So this is lupus vulgaris. This is under in black and white. And what is this? Look at this. The granuloma, which is pale, hardly any lymphocytes surrounding it, strikingly circular, strikingly localized. Strikingly localized. See here, completely pale eosinophilic masses, which is typical of epithelioid granuloma. No lymphocyte, hardly any lymphocyte, naked granuloma. This is sarcoidosis. So this is black and white version. Very circular. Nothing else works like this. It's only this condition which shows such granuloma. What is this? This diagram is actually from Dr. Premlata. She used to show this, that these are kiwi fruits and this granuloma is somewhat like this. It indeed is. Look at here, this center, this is altered collagen, changed collagen, which is a little acellular, and then you have this cells all around it. This is granuloma annulare. So here again, showing this. Somebody is speaking, please. Please switch off your mic. So again, granuloma annulare, and you can see some giant cells also in this. Here, somewhat unusual, but you can see it occasionally. Granuloma annulare. This, of course, is a typical lesion. This is not my biopsy. This is from liver. Granuloma annulare is a ring. Clinically, it is a ring histologically. Now, I'm showing you all of these four to appreciate their shape and size and location under scanner view in black and white. This is, of course, borderline tuberculoid leprosy, lupus vulgaris, sarcoidosis, granuloma annulare. Now, sometimes in granuloma annulare, you can see mucin also. You can see here. And then there is what is called an incomplete granuloma annulare, wherein you don't see the typical change that I described earlier. But you see these lymphocytes going everywhere in between collagen fibers. This is what is called the India filing, and this entire appearance is what is called busy dermis. You see something happening, something busy. That is, of course, incomplete granuloma annulare. Now, this condition is a paradox. This is a typical cascading granuloma, and you can see the large granuloma filling up the dermis. In the center, you have some necrotic material. You have some Langerhans type of giant cells here. And this is not tuberculosis. This is lupus miliaris disseminatus et faciae. You can see the Langerhans type of giant cells. What is this? This is what is called a square-shaped dermal papilla, wherein you have a wide dermal papilla and vertically hanging reiterates. Why? Because something is filling up this space. Some amorphous substance is sitting there. So that is box-like. This is what is called a box-like dermal papilla. And this, of course, is amyloidosis. This is congruent stain, which is staining it a khaki color. There are some cleft-like spaces. These spaces are very characteristic of this condition. Remember this. You can see it here also. This is H&E. This is, of course, congruent. Now, I'm going to show you a series of slides. Very interesting. Just keep following it. Now, look at this slide. There is a depression here. There is something filling it up. Then there is, of course, a granular layer. Beneath this is a acanthotic epidermis. And then in this section, the same thing has become deeper. It is more cup-shaped. Some material is coming out here. And on either side, there is a lot of acanthosis. It is like this, as if something is coming out. And see here, this almost looks like collagen. What you see here, you're seeing here. But you can still see epidermis here. But here, you are trying to see a break. This, of course, is reactive perforating collagenesis, perforating dermatosis. And see how beautifully changes can be tracked. Now here, the perforation is complete. The material is going out. And then, of course, there is an inflammatory reaction. On either side, epidermis is trying to remove it like this. Very beautiful. And this, of course, is a higher power view, wherein there is a total disorganization of the epidermis here, and the material is getting eliminated through transepidermal elimination. This is why I called my lecture, Dermatopathology is Beautiful. This, of course, is the clinical picture. What is this? Looks similar. Now let us see. And if you see here, there is a small depression here. not as big as that, but this is a small depression. Again, there is pinkish material here, which is going at an angle. What is this? And this is also filled up with some nuclei. And this is a parakeratotic column, which is going at an angle, not like this, not vertically, but it's going like this. This is porokeratosis. This was, of course, a superficial disseminated porokeratosis, so the whole change is very minimal. Here, while there is a depression, the depression never reaches the basal layer. So it is just a shallow depression. This, of course, is the coronoid vein. What is this? It looks similar again and very colorful, very beautiful. What's happening here? Certainly it doesn't look normal. There is, of course, a inflammatory infiltrate everywhere, and epidermis is hypertrophic here. What is this? And elsewhere, epidermis was this, hypertrophic with very gross hyperkeratosis, almost looking like a tumor-like lesion. And this is that. This actually is a mycetoma granule. What had happened was the tissue had become soft. The granuloma had kind of slipped out during sectioning and was lying in this depression, giving this very nice and beautiful appearance. And when we searched elsewhere, this is the lower dermis. Elsewhere, we started finding something. See this? See this? And see this? Typical granule of mycetoma. So very nice serial sections wherein you can find more and more information. That's why in histopathology, you have to study as many different sections as possible to spot the deer again. So sometimes what is hidden is more important than what is visible. Now, this is one of the slides which I really like. If anything justifies this title of this lecture, Dermatopathology is Beautiful, it is this particular slide. Look at what is happening. I mean, you can visualize the clinical picture. There is a hill here. There is another hill here. And there is a valley in the center. So two verrucous lesions with a central valley. And if you see closely, there is gross hyperkeratosis that of course can be made, almost papillomatosis. And then this epidermis here is showing vacuolation. This epidermis is normal in the center. Here on either side is showing vacuolation. And that is what is here. Vacuolation of cells. And see here, as if it is blown out completely. Everything is vacuolated. Cells have got fused together. This is what is lysis of epidermis. This is epidermolytic hyperkeratosis. Typical name. Nothing describes this condition better than this. Epidermolytic hyperkeratosis. And if it is focal, this is what you will see. This was in another condition, but sometimes it can be focal. And look at these lesions. Skin colored, slightly yellowish lesions, different parts of the body. And what do you see? One type of cell filling up the entire dermis. One type of cell. Every cell is strikingly similar to the other cell. Strikingly monomorphic. See? And then what kind of cell are you seeing? You're seeing cells which are not completely eosinophilic, which are not completely basophilic, somewhat amphiphilic, with a central nucleus and surrounded by cytoplasm. So, somewhat what is typically called as a fried egg appearance. When you see this cell here or here, this is a typical fried egg appearance. Single fry when you see, this is a typical appearance. This of course is mastocytosis. You can see here, this is typical fried egg appearance. And what is this? Again, strikingly monomorphic. But that was amphiphilic, but this is completely bluish. And there are of course dilated blood vessels. This is glomus cell. Every cell is the same. There are very few conditions in dermatopathology which are like this. Hemangioma. So when you look at a tumor or look at any lesion, we should not be like blind men and the elephant, imagining part of an elephant to be an elephant. We should look at the whole of the lesion. That's what I want to show next. Look at this. This was sent by a friend of mine. Verrucous lesion, it's scarring. It was thought to be tuberculosis verrucosa cutis. They had indeed biopsied it. They saw this. Very gross hyperkeratosis. Epidermis going everywhere with a chronic inflammatory infiltrate. nothing seen. So they had said it is non-specific. When we did further sections, we began to see something here. Can you see this? Slightly brownish. And of course, typical planet bodies of chromoblastomycosis. Excellent diagnosis, and patient was treated successfully. So the purpose of biopsy is to find the cause of the lesion. In other words, the end result of a biopsy is to find the origin of the lesion. That's the paradigm. That's what we have to do. If you can't find the origin, if you can't explain the cause, at least you have to explain what is happening all along. You have to explain the process. That is particularly important in inflammatory dermatosis. So as I come to the end of this lecture, I want to show you something colorful and beautiful again. What is this? You can see some strange looking things here. You never see this color in anywhere in dermatopathology. See this? Shining golden, some circular bodies, some curved bodies, some banana-like bodies. That gives out the diagnosis. This is ochronosis, pseudo-ochronosis in this case, because patient had applied lots of hydroquinone. So sometimes in dermatopathology and in clinical dermatology, you have to look around and you have to look behind also to find out what you want, and what you want is the answer. And the answer is the origin of the lesion. So learn dermatopathology, and of course you learn surgery also, no issues, but learn dermatopathology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Dr. Venkat. If you stop sharing, I'll just
Yes.
it was indeed a very excellent, super excellent this thing. I just wanted to just a moment. We had prepared some virtual this thing also. I'm just trying to. Just a moment. I don't know.
Dr. Mathur,
Yes.
there is one chat here which says the leukocytoclastic vasculitis part, the audio broke at that time.
Yes.
So they want to me to explain that again.
Yes. Sure. Do you want to show
that
this slide?
portion that yeah.
Sure. That you can do it. That you can do it.
Just 1 minute. So if you can stop sharing yours, I can.
No, I've stopped sharing. No issue. And enabled all the enabled you to share it.
No, but I'm not seeing mine here. I can't see my presentation.
You can share, sir. Venkat, sir, you share your PPT.
No, I'm trying to share, but I don't see. 1 minute.
You just minimize the zoom.
Okay. 1 minute.
Minimize the zoom, and then you will see.
Okay.
You minimize this, and when you want to maximize it, on the right hand side there's an icon.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Right. I request all to please mute themselves. Right. Now we can see your screen. Yes.
Okay. So now this is what I was trying to show you. See, in leukocytoclastic vasculitis, now here you can see the vessels are all disorganized. They seem to be filled up with material, cells, as well as this orange-like material, which is fibrinoid. And in this particular slide, you can see how it is following the blood vessel. It is going up here like this, then it is curving horizontally, then again at different angles going up. It's as if you're seeing the three-dimensional architecture of a biopsy and in vasculitis. So it is going up here and then turning away like this again. So imagine, see here, the vessel, it is going up like this and then going further here, then another vessel is going up and the vasculitis is following that process. That's what is very nice about this. This is what you normally see. You don't typically see a slide like this, but you see many times. And then of course, this is the high power with polymorphonuclear cells, that salt and pepper appearance. This is the same that I showed earlier, which is the course of the blood vessels and the infiltrate following it. And this of course is the salt and pepper appearance of the polymorphonuclear cells. This is what I showed as nodular vasculitis. Here the vessel wall involved is very close to subcutis. So it is in the lower dermis, and this is an arteriole, a thick walled vessel with plenty of smooth muscle cells in the wall. And then the fibrinoid filling it up with debris, as you can see. And you see how the multiple layers of the vessel wall have got separated. This is the infiltration into the vessel wall. This is what we refer. And here is broken off in places. The vessel wall has broken off in places. And then of course, these are slightly older lesions wherein the vessel wall has become thick and then filled with material. And this sometimes you see a granuloma along with it. This is the granuloma that you see in erythema induratum. This is of course the same nodular vasculitis lesion that I showed you earlier, large arterial. Now here what I was trying to show was, look here, if you see just this and compare with this looks the same. This is of course vasculitis, but it looks something filling up vessels, multiple vessels, one here, one here, one here, one here, and then it is going up in the same way that I showed earlier. But when you look at it closely, it is not filled with fibrinoid, but it is filled with cells, and those cells look different. And when you see closely, you are actually seeing diskeratotic cells, and the cells are atypical. And you can see here large cells, atypical cells, mitotic figures, and this was metastatic adenocarcinoma in the skin. The primary was in the breast. So this is what I showed you regarding vasculitis.
Is it finished? Yes.
Finished.
All right, because I didn't listen any voice. So what I wanted to present you was this. I do not know whether I'll be. Yes, this is.
There is one more question: how to identify a nerve?
I know we will have question answer after we felicitate you and give you this thing, a virtual presentation. This I all learned from Bhumesh. Bhumesh is here, so I thought that we should give a bouquet. We should honor you with the turban and a felicitation certificate. So along with my team, thank you very much. This thing. And now we'll be having question and answer sessions. So that's all. Thank you. Then the question answer sessions we'll be doing it after I stop sharing my this thing. So let us see what are the questions. Bhumesh, you organized very nice this thing, and we learned so many things. So initially there were some audio problems. And then there was a question, please explain leukocytoclastic vasculitis again, which you have done it. And super presentation, excellent. Ifat is here, Ifat Hassan. Dr. Ifat Hassan.
Ji, sir.
Where are you?
Hello.
Right from Jain, Srinagar to Kanyakumari, we can see on this chat.
Good evening, sir.
Very good evening. Very good.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Ifat.
Good evening.
Then how to differentiate How to differentiate artifacts? Gaurav Dash wants to ask.
Artifacts, of course, there are any number of artifacts. I showed you some mechanical artifacts which are caused by biopsy, like using a forceps,
Yes, you showed in the initial.
pinate. Those are mechanical. Some are electrical, like I showed you one slide of radio frequency, wherein you had bluish necrotic material that is injury caused to the skin. Likewise, similar artifacts can happen during processing, vacuolation. Such things also can happen.
Well, Dr. Rashmikant is saying that excellent lecture and learned many things after 30 years. Yeah. Dr. Rashmikant, I was constantly moving in between. Dr. Rashmikant. Oh, he's not responding. Then Himanshu.
Dinesh, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Dinesh, can I ask a question, Dr. Nath?
Yes.
I'm always there. Venkat,
Yeah.
the question I want to ask you is, there is always a confusion between interface dermatitis and spongiatic dermatitis. So it's really very, very peculiar how to put it to the clinical correlation.
See, basically location. Interface is in the interface between dermis and epidermis. So it has to have its prominence in the dermoepidermal junction, the basal layer. It can get a little bit upwards, but that interface has to get affected. In spongiosis, interface never gets affected. It is high up in stratum Malpighi. So that location usually helps. They can overlap. For example, in Pliva, you get spongiosis upwards, but same thing happens in erythema multiforme. But interface dermatitis also is there. But in a pure spongiatic dermatitis, like contact dermatitis or eczema, you will never get an interface dermatitis.
Then
Another question is it possible that the slide which is shown to two dermatopathologists, the slide is same, but the opinion is different? The
I
opinion
didn't
is different.
understand that.
No, if the biopsy is sent to two dermatopathologists of the same patient, the opinion is different from both.
Of course, it can happen. It can happen clinically also.
Oh yes. It happens clinically also. So that is not a even that's possible. So there are lot many.
So then it becomes difficult for a clinician. It becomes difficult for a clinician how to go about it.
Don't show it to two people.
Show it
Show it to only one person whom you trust.
Show it to one only.
Yeah.
Well, appreciation from England.
Ultimately,
Dr. Satyesh, he is telling us that how can you make histopathology that interesting and beautiful. I have seen it today. Thank you, Satyesh. Satyesh is from,
Thank you.
right away from England is giving the comment. Then Dr. Prerna Jha, appreciating the session. Dr. Arun Joshi, Dr. iPad, I do not know whether attend. Dr. Gopinath, Dr. Khatija, they all are appreciated. Dr. Neha, how to identify nerve in H&E stain? Neha wants to ask. How to identify nerve in H&E stain?
Nerve, you look, determine it by one location. It's usually seen in lower dermis. The nerve which is filled with bluish nuclei. Nerve, of course, is pinkish. There is nothing else that can be confused with it except perhaps the arrectors. The arrectors is more related to the hair follicle. It is more found in the mid dermis and it is much larger. So not that difficult to distinguish.
So anybody, Dr. US?
Sir, I want to ask a question for.
Sure, please.
Dr. Venkat, it was an excellent kaleidoscope of dermatopathology, wonderful lecture, very informative. And my question to you is that you highlighted the importance of, the biopsy in black and white image. You showed 4 kinds of, granulomas. So how do you do that and what is the importance? Because we normally don't do that. Why do you need to do that?
That is only done by Photoshop.
Okay. So why do you need to
see
have
it under the microscope that way? It is more to learn. See, this is what Ackerman taught people.
Okay.
That the scanner view and to lesser extent low power view are more important in dermatology.
Agreed. Yes.
And in what you see in scanner view, in fact, he made a separate kind of scanner for his microscope, which could see the entire slide. So that in scanner view, you see only shape, location, size. These are the attributes that you see. You don't see cellular details. So what he was trying to teach was, by looking at these macro attributes in one sweeping view, how do you pick up diagnosis?
No, that's all right. But
Color
going for a
is not important.
black and white.
That's what
Why
I'm
do you
trying to
have?
tell you.
Yes.
That is the next part of the question. So once
Okay.
you recognize that, you recognize the shape, the location, the size, why should it be in color? So what stays is these macro attributes. So that's what I was trying to highlight.
The beauty is in the beholder's mind. That was the famous routine. Barney Ackerman came once in Jaipur, and he was with us for 2 days. And we organized a lecture of that, and he was very resistant. I said that he was being transferred from Mumbai friends to Jaipur. That Barney is coming and just look after him. So I organized a lecture with that. And he was stubborn. He said that I am on leave and I don't want to. Come on, Dr. Bharti Ackerman, we wanted it. So he only took this blackboard and a whiteboard and a black pen, and probably that lecture was being appreciated like anything. All histopathologists of Jaipur were there, and probably one of the best lectures we organized there. And at that time, the next day, it is a long story that what he did. I'll tell you something else. But he used to tell, the beauty is in the beholder's mind, right? So
I attended the Bombay, CME of Ackerman. So that was excellent.
Just after that, he came long. It's a very old story.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you very much. And any other comment from anybody, please?
Yeah, sir.
Sorry.
Yeah, Dinesh sir, Bhumesh.
Sure.
Yeah, Venkat sir, excellent session. So in pediatric dermatology, especially even giving injection is very difficult. So especially below 6 years of age. So can you blow some light on the importance of histopathology, especially in the early ages?
See, in very early ages, it is easy. It is easy to hold the child and do it. All you need is a sharp punch, and it comes out very easily.
And even local
Is in children who are 8 years, 10 years, who are difficult to control. So you can use some sedation, like what we do for while removing a wart or while removing anything in a child. In fact, a biopsy is much easier than removing 10 warts in a child. How much time? It hardly takes a minute for doing a biopsy, and you don't have to stitch it if it is less than 4 millimeters. So it shouldn't be a problem.
Even you can apply EMLA also, right?
Oh, yes.
EMLA topical.
Yeah, but the child will cry not because of pain, but because of fear.
By seeing the injections,
He will cry anyway.
instrument, yeah.
True.
So the child cries before getting into the.
Data.
Right. This is all the more because of the fear.
Yeah.
More because of the fear.
Venkat, you are a very good orator. Very good orator. Superb.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. It was pleasure talking to you all, and have a good day. Be safe, and see you.
Thank you, sir. It was a
Thank you.
time well spent.
We are all safe sitting at home only, you see. For last 6 months, I'm sitting at home doing nothing.
So he's saying, stay safe. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Keep on staying at
I
home.
mean, see, in
Stay safe.
Bangalore, I know at
Yeah.
least about 5 to 6 dermatologists who got infected, but they all covered, not a problem.
Listen, it's a matter of chance. How your body behaves and what is in your this thing. Because one of our friend, my batchmate, who's a very good surgeon, is right now in the hospital and probably very serious.
My MBBS classmate is battling for his life. He was in ventilator. He was taken off the ventilator. He was shifted to the ward, and then he developed subarachnoid hemorrhage. But he also had severe diabetes, hypertension, renal failure, all those also there. So if you are otherwise healthy, the problem is not that severe. But The disease is unpredictable, no doubt about it.
Very erratic.
Yes.
Sometimes old people also come out of without any problems. The main people just go off like that.
That is what.
Correct.
That's what. Just they go like that. That's what.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you and good night, everybody.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Lalit, how are you? Lalit,
I'm
how
fine,
are
sir. I'm good, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
you? Hi, Bhumesh.
Sir, Niranjan sir.